Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, and it's time for this week's Friday Morning GM with my co-host, Voss Laricos. Voss, how you doing?
Very good, Ken. Very good. Great to see the Ravens rebound from week one with a emphatic week two win. Back from a trip abroad for my brother's wedding, and happy to be here with you today.
All right. One-sided score for the Ravens. Not maybe the one-sided win they'd hoped for in terms of offensive efficiency. And it's such a first-world problem, but they scored 81 points in 2 games, and yet they can't sustain drives. And this is this is not a small problem. And the level of offense is unsustainable with the unsustainability of drives.
Boom or bust offense. That's what it's been this year. That applies to Derrick Henry. That applies to Lamar Jackson. And, as long as Lamar is continuing to hit those deep shots when they need them, it works out. But you certainly would like to see a little bit more consistency, no question about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about some things. We did hit briefly on this last week that there was a simple restructure for Roquan Smith, which pushed $8 million of his salary from this year into signing bonus that provides some relief. Now I look at 26 and 27, so that's the last 2 years Roquan is under contract, and he's got a $32 million cap hit, 32 and change, I believe, both years. Now, most of that is money that's already been spent. They can't get out from under that. They'd have a lot of dead money no matter what. But there is a $7.3 million savings from cutting him next year that I think the Ravens are going to have to look at seriously in the larger context.
I would agree. You're pushing $4 million into each year. The structure was backloaded to start. They've now dipped into that again. It might sound funny to say this after Roquan's best game as a Raven, but you need to see more impact plays against contenders, making splash plays against the Browns at home and a pair of rookie running backs is great. But make some plays in coverage against tight ends or against better offensive lines, better quarterbacks is I think what you want to see from a player earning that percentage of the cap. The Ravens have a long list of high value impending free agents, and perhaps if he does not, if he looks more like he did in week one than he did in week two, that 7.5 or 7.3 may become appealing.
It would change the dynamic of how they have to deal this offseason. To replacing that ILB middle linebacker position is going to be very difficult. The fact that Buchanan is getting more reps than Simpson, I actually think is related to replacing Roquan, not necessarily because Roquan is leaving the team, but because Roquan might get hurt, and they need to make sure they have the next option ready to go. I will say this: I think if you had to go through the three possibilities, play on the current contract, restructure and extend, or cut for the $7.3 million savings, let's try to assign a percentage to each of those three. I have to do that myself really quickly. I had to just.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, I'll go first since I caused this problem by not having this in our notes ahead of time. I think the chance is about 50% that they restructure and extend. Maybe 20% that they cut, might be only 15. I really don't think the chance of them playing under the current contract is that high. I'm gonna Delphi this and say it's 60, 25, and 15 under the current contract.
So I had 15% for cutting. Now, this is based off what I think the Ravens will do, and I think they are absolutely enamored with Roquan's locker room personality. I think 60% that they extend and 15% that they allow him to play on their current contract. But I would potentially advise caution in extending him because he's a player that seemingly has lost half a step. 2 missed tackles versus 2 stops in week one was not a great result versus Buffalo. And I think in years past, we've seen they don't want to take on those large cap hits that they have built into the contract. So they don't want the player to play under the current. So they extend, and then that ends up costing them, biting them back a few years down the road.
Well, that's the risk of borrowing from the future with any player, is that you may force yourself into a position where you have to extend them. Just ask the New Orleans Saints. But the Eagles and Browns, the Browns in particular, have been in tremendous hell with that going on.
Sure.
All right. Now, There's an interesting report that came out from Mike Sando. Mike Sando, a big friend of the show, right? We really appreciate his work. But it was on the cash to cap relationship that the Ravens have had over the last decade or so. Talk us through that.
Yes, I thought this was pretty interesting. Just released last week on The Athletic from Mike Sando. So from 2015 to 2019, the Ravens were 32nd in cash over cap. Now, some of that is due to the fact that Joe Flacco signed his second extension, I believe, in 2014. So that was not
2013.
included. 2013. So that
Yeah.
was not included in the second one.
After they rolled money forward again. Okay.
That when the balloon came due, as we were just talking about, you can't play on the current number, so you want to extend it, and that came back to kind of cost them some dead money. However, more recently, from 2020 to 2024, the Ravens have jumped up to 10th in cash over cap, which is a little bit uncharacteristic for a team that has typically been cap conservative, cap frugal, maybe the 2000 season not included. And the point I was going to make is I heard Eric DeCosta say Nick Matteo, who is their chief negotiator and sort of the not a CFO, but he apparently
Capologist. Yeah.
capologist has been looking at what other teams are doing around the league, and they are sort of borrowing maybe some more aggressive strategies as we've seen with void years, et cetera.
Yeah, well, that's understandable that they would do more than that, particularly if the rest of the league is doing so much more that they're getting themselves into a worse position. Then I think it's okay to borrow up. But this is a comment that I've heard from DeCosta more than once the last couple of years. He said we want to be above average in terms of cash spend per year. It doesn't necessarily relate to cash to cap, but the cap is fixed. And the cash spend is really what he's comparing himself to versus other teams, which I assume that means that's the same place. Now, I don't know if there's some adjustment for that for dead money. So, for example, does it count as a cash payment, the $10 million that they're paying Odell Beckham this year in dead money? I don't
I
know.
would assume so. I mean, I think cash is cash. I didn't see the methodology on this one, but correlation isn't causation necessarily. 15 to 19 was a dark era of the Ravens as far as regular season and postseason success. 20 to 24 has been maybe their best run, probably their best run of regular season success. I would say. So sometimes cash, but I think it also speaks to the fact that they were not drafting and developing players that were worth re-signing in the 15 to 18 era, and now they are. Now we look at this list as we touched on 2 episodes ago, the last one I was on, where they have 5 of the top 25 impending free agents coming up when they're already 10th in cash over cap.
There's a trailing point to that because obviously the 2018 draft was the Ravens' best ever, and they had a whole bunch of players that they would have loved to re-sign from that, but they just didn't have the money to get everybody, so they had to unwind that draft. The guy they really didn't want to lose was Zach Sealer, who they lost for free. But they also traded Hayden Hurst. They traded Orlando Brown before year 4, players that they would have loved to keep, but it wasn't going to work within the cap structure. And then of course they were able to
Hayden Hurst as well.
I'm sorry, I thought I mentioned Hayden Hurst. It was the guy they traded in.
I'm sorry.
So, but that's all right. That's all right. But they kept Mark Andrews and they kept Lamar, and they have done a good job certainly with that. All right, let's talk the injury report. Now, we record this on Thursday afternoon. We do not yet have an injury report. We do have participation information from today's practice. You want to take us through that?
Absolutely. This is from Jeff Zaribek. 2 hours ago, as we record here, Rasheen Ali, concussion, was in a non-contact jersey, but he was participating. Isaiah Likely was participating. The Ravens put out a clip of him going through some drills, so it looks like he may be able to return on Monday. Maybe that extra day helps him out. Marlon Humphrey also participated, so that's a tremendous development there. Not participating, Nate Wiggins, who appeared to maybe be shaken up when he was tackled from behind on the touchdown celebration or the interception celebration. Nnamdi Madubuike, who I think had a rest day last week as well. John Jenkins, the backup nose tackle. Kyle Van Noy with a hamstring that may be an extended absence. And Pat Ricard is still on the shelf.
Yeah, so the language was poor on Ricard in terms of his ability to return. It's now being changed to it's taking longer than we expected. I think that they've got to be getting close to the point with that injury that they want to put him on IR. But I don't believe, and this came up earlier today. I was talking with Frazier about this, but I don't believe that football has a retroactive IR that like baseball does. So they
I don't
just,
think so. No.
if you put him on now, he's out through week 6, and
Yes.
the earliest he can come back is week 7. I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea, because they've used up 2 of the 3 elevations for ZMP already, and I think that the next move would be to activate either him or Lucas Scott to the roster, so you would have the fullback. But the problems sustaining drives, I believe there's 2 primary concerns. The offensive line has played like crap, and that's as a unit. But Voorhees has played the worst. Everybody else has had one pretty good game and one very bad game. Linderbaum's actually had an average game and a bad game, but Voorhees
Yes.
had 2 bad games. So we're now looking at really trying to figure out how this offensive line is going to fit together. Tough matchup against Cleveland. It wasn't an easy defensive front to face, and they actually are a bad match for a lot of the things the Ravens do well. Myles Garrett plays with a lot of power, and Ronnie Stanley is a finesse left tackle.
Hmm.
He's got good feet, tries to get in the way. You had Linderbaum in there, and he's not good against really powerful pass rushers. And the Browns have them now, it seems like, all over the place with Malik Collins and Mason Graham, really looking good. And even Shelby, who's been around the league for a while, has been pretty good too, and it was a problem for Linderbaum. So you know, there's not going to be easy fix for the offensive line. It seems like we're getting a new offensive line pretty much every year in
Hmm.
terms of replacing parts. This may be another offseason where they have to go there.
Yeah. A couple thoughts on all that. First of all, to Ricard, you may with the bye week, week 7, you may be able to sort of steal a week on IR where it doesn't hurt you as much. So that would count towards the inactivation, but it would also he wouldn't miss a game. Um, but then again, you have the Lions, Chiefs, Texans, and Rams. The next 4. That's a gauntlet. That is not a place where you want to go shorthanded. On the topic of Linderbaum, when he struggles with power defensive tackles, I don't know how you can justify paying him anything in the realm of top
Sure.
of the market. It's just that would be a mistake. I think it really would be a mistake.
I'm at the same point. I mean, he's the third guy I think is reasonable to re-sign after Jones and Likely. I don't think they're going to be able to re-sign Oweh, and for the money it would take, I believe Oweh is probably already gone. Um, you know, it's just it's, I know everybody loves Linderbaum and everybody really wants it to work out, but I'm exactly where he cannot reset the market where he is now. I think he's lost value since the year began. I think
Yes.
I would have been happy to pay 16 million. My number now would be 14 and a half or 15, and I'd
Hmm.
probably still do it. And because I think he's glue to the offensive line in a lot of ways, but he has got to play better. I mean,
Yeah.
and some of the things that we'd be asking him to do, it's kind of like, to ask Linderbaum to be good against power rushers is kind of like as reasonable it is to ask Fa'alele to be a good mobile run blocker. There's only so much he can do.
Right. He can't grow longer arms and he can't add to his frame to add more strength. It's just the situation that it is. Voorhees, I certainly agree. I mean, the first game, the right side of the offensive line was a sieve, and the second game, the left side. And Voorhees, I think the leash has to be getting a little bit shorter because, with Ben Cleveland, um, he's at least an adequate pass protector. He sort of has that same um, benefit of size that Falele does. That he's just too big and long for these pass rushers to get around. So even if he's not the most nimble or technically sound, it's tough for them to do that. And the way things are shaping up, this may become more of a pass first offense. I don't subscribe to the theory that the Ravens have to find a way to run into stacked boxes effectively. I think you have to take what the defense gives you,
Yes.
regardless of your fundamental core philosophies. If you got 8 or 9 guys in the box, don't run into that. There's no reason to.
I mean, I completely agree. I think there may have been other things going on during this Browns game. Some people are suggesting that Lamar was hurt. I actually kind of think that's irresponsible to suggest that. I don't think it's true. I think most of the time when you don't see Lamar run the football and people are throwing their arms up and say, "Why isn't Lamar running the football?" It's a case of the defense is taking that away from him. You just mentioned, The Ravens need to take exactly what the defense gives them. They can beat you every single way in terms of having receivers go just about anywhere. They're great at making everybody defend every blade of grass, but they certainly will be better at doing so if they get the additional speed threat they need in the lineup. Obviously, we're both very unhappy about the activation of Ali for 2 weeks, but it appears that's over now. I do not foresee Ali playing this week. The fact he's in a red jersey is wonderful for him, but I think he'll keep him out even if he clears protocol in time. Keaton Mitchell's got to play. He just
Uh,
has to get an opportunity.
1,000%, 1,000% agree there. It's nonsensical to if excuse me, if Justice Hill is better on special teams than Rasheen Ali, and Keaton Mitchell's a better running back than Justice Hill, then what are we doing here? I just can't understand, especially when you have these loaded boxes. Why not put your speed threat out there and try to gain the edge, or or use him as misdirection, as Harbaugh
Yeah.
intimated was available to them. He's lightning in a bottle. He's a perfect complement to Derrick Henry. He's the perfect thunder and lightning. He's done nothing but exceed expectations and have one of the best rookie seasons on an EPA basis as any player ever. And I just can't understand John Harbaugh's. It's almost like he wants to show his power or his micro. I don't know his theory, his philosophy that special teams is so important, and he wants to value the Ali who has reward him, who has tried hard in practice, and it just doesn't make a difference. He was out all game last week, and special teams coverage was great.
Yeah, first of all, that's a good point, but second of all, there's a solution anyway. So if you have to say if Justice Hill, I mean, he hasn't done anything as a runner or receiver so far this year, and honestly, I think he's one of the real hidden problems with the offense not being able to sustain drives. Is he's not the first down machine he was last year. Well, maybe it's time to get Keaton Mitchell in there for a much more substantial portion of snaps. I'm talking like 10 to 13 per game. So we're not talking, he's not going to take, 60% of Henry's role or anything like that. But,
Yeah,
10 to 13 out of 65 snaps per game, he can do a lot of good for your offense. He can be there, maybe even a couple of more if you're willing to use him in pony, but he can take some of Hill's snaps, particularly snaps that Hill has on earlier downs. It gives you such an additional extra prong on your pitchfork to basically
hmm
attack that defense. I mean, it's so useful to have him and in jet motion in terms of how the defense has to react to that. But plus, every time you run him in motion, you get a sense of how that defense will
yes.
react to that, which is an enormous advantage that the Lamar is perfectly capable of taking advantage of.
For sure. And I've been a supporter of Justice Hill throughout his time here. I thought he was underrated by the fan base for most
Mhm.
of his time, but he seems to be showing his age a little bit. I think that also applies to Mark Andrew this season.
Mhm.
And also, maybe my favorite player on the team after Lamar, Marlon Humphrey, has nothing lasts forever in the NFL. As we always talk about, you have to constantly turn the roster, get younger, get younger, get younger. And you're seeing some of the results there. But anyway, Ken, I think we got a little excited and jumped through one of
A
the
couple
topics here
questions.
when we wanted to discuss potential injury replacements for the defenders who are probably going to miss or may miss this next game. And let's start with Marlon Humphrey. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a tough cover. Marlon Humphrey has not had his best season so far with a strained groin. I'm not sure if he's the best option. If he can go, who would you have in his place if it comes to it?
They don't really have a lot of choices. The only other slot guy they legitimately have is Keon Martin. They've shown a willingness to put him on the field, so I don't think they would deviate from that and try and make a Woozier say into a slot corner or Jair Alexander, which would be the other possibility. Alexander will come back, and they'll need him to play outside some in this game. I expect that to occur on a rotational or on a partial basis, not for the entire game, but they're going to get a look at him in the first half. They're going to see what he's got, and hopefully it's a hell of a lot better than we saw against Buffalo. And he'll be ready to play some. But those would be the two. Do you see it playing out any differently?
No, I think Martin's probably the guy. I think you really need Wiggins to go this game, and I
Yep.
wouldn't. And I think he may be a guy you want to shadow Jameson Williams with, because you're going to need bracket coverage on St. Brown, whether Humphrey can go or not. And you need probably going to need Hamilton to help out on Laporta, because Humphrey was covering. Um, Njoku most of the game because Roquan just doesn't really match up very good against tight ends.
Well, they could go to big nickel this game and
Uh-huh.
really attack Laporta in that way. That also would benefit because you get Humphrey close to the line of scrimmage on the strong side of the field. Most of your wide receiver screens go that. Most of your swing
Mhm.
passes, frankly, go that direction too. So Jahmyr Gibbs has caught 13 balls. He's every ball that's been thrown to him for a whopping 41 yards. So the Packers figured out how to stop that.
Right.
And I think having Hamilton up close to the line of scrimmage would give you an advantage in run defense. It give you an advantage in covering tight ends, and it would also have Hamilton on the strong side of the field for any kind of wide receiver screen play they want to do.
Yes, I definitely hope that they can make that happen. This game's probably going to test two of the issues that I dislike the most from this offseason, not getting a little bit more help at safety to allow Hamilton to go closer, and not keeping Jalen Armour-Davis to bolster your cornerback depth. So we'll
Yeah,
see how it plays out. At least Tampa was okay last game. I'll give him that.
yeah. Yeah, we have kind of forgotten him, and he actually played pretty well, I thought, or was it played okay? But Kyle Van Noy presents a different
Yes.
problem for the Ravens because presumably this means David Ajabo now gets a chance. I mean, I'm watching for transactions, watching for workouts, watching for whatever the Ravens may be doing with existing veteran edge rushers out there. But presumably he gets a chance. I would expect him to be an early down player and not a guy that they bring in on obvious passing downs. Yeah, where are you on that?
Um, Sorry, catching a little static there. Did you froze? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm sorry. The question
Okay.
was, in terms of obvious passing downs for a job, or do you think you'll see more run downs?
Yeah, I think actually Trenton Simpson maybe take on some Sam duties on early downs. I think he's bulked up a little bit where he could potentially handle that role. And I think John Harbaugh alluded to that being a possibility. I think that could maybe suit
Voss, can
Trenton
I ask you to
Simpson.
turn off your video? This usually improves the
Yes,
staticky nature, so we'll try and work that way. All
yes.
right.
I
Hopefully,
have
that
to figure
by
out
the
how to do
time
that.
you hear this, it will be all corrected by the fact that we're using separate recordings here.
Sorry, Ken. How do I turn off my video?
It'd be at the bottom in settings, and then there's a camera, and you can turn it off there, I believe.
Mm,
Okay, I got to let you try and figure that out on your own here while I kind of set up the show here a little more here. Um, Ricard is another guy who has to be replaced. And so far, they've used ZMP. They've used two of the three elevations they have for him. Now, obviously, if Ricard goes to IR, they can actually elevate someone into that spot. But if he doesn't go to IR, then they have to either use a third for ZMP. They have to bring out Lucas Scott, which I think might be the case anyway, or they have to, potentially make that change, bite the bullet, and wait until about week 7, 8 for Ricard to return. And honestly, you mentioned they could steal a week, but if Ricard, whichever week he leaves, whichever week he goes to IR, it's going to be week 8 that he'd be back with the Ravens anyway. At this point,
Ken, I'm struggling with this. I'm going to log out and log back in.
okay, yeah, you can do that. All right, no problem. Continuing on a little bit, we'll talk about Ali going to IR, which I think is also a possibility. If he's in a red non-contact jersey today, the Ravens are desperately in need of those roster spots to deal with the issues they have at fullback and tight end. Just talking now about the issues at fullback and tight end and the difficulty getting those snaps filled. You think moving Ali to IR would be a possibility? I know it's just a concussion, but if you're going to lose 1 week, you might, in some ways, you might as well lose 4.
He might as well lose 15 as far as I'm concerned with Ali. I think Ricard, it seems that he is, taking longer to heal. It does seem just by the video that I saw that likely may be able to return. And I think that would really be a boost to this offense with the multifaceted abilities he has. So, maybe you have to take a look at some different personnel packages, given the players you have available to you. You saw the depth of the receiving core in this last week. I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit more 11 personnel, spreading them out and letting Lamar maybe run from pistol against a spread look where it could really open up some rushing lanes for him.
All for that. One thing that's been pointed out to me by people who watch the Lions closely is just how an extreme a man team they are. And
Hmm.
that's not normally what anybody plays against Lamar Jackson. And also, I will say almost all man and zone coverage is dictated by down and distance. And the only time the teams really dip heavily into man coverage is on third and medium to long, where they really want to get after the quarterback differently and need to defend the sticks differently. You don't
Hmm.
generally do it on second and 5 or first and 10. Those are not downs where you try and get away from zone coverage. Really, you need to have all the exits guarded on those plays. But Lamar Jackson provides a special threat that it would surprise me if the Lions decide to or even able to adapt to their man coverage schemes to Lamar Jackson on a fairly high percentage of downs.
Agreed, for sure. Lamar has a sterling record against NFC competition. I think some of that is because they don't know how to defend him. But the Lions have played the Ravens now, I want to say 3 times in Lamar era. The
I think
Tucker
that's right.
Long field goal game last year, the blowout, and one before that. So they may have a system there. They're breaking in new coordinators too. So this is now week 3. The coordinators are starting to get their legs under them a little bit. The new guys. So we'll see. It should be very interesting. It should be a good matchup. Really looking forward to this Monday night showdown.
Yeah. All right. In terms of the poor offensive line play, we obviously saw the practice squad signing of Sam Mustipher yesterday, and at the same time, we had let's go through that first because I think it'll set
Sure.
up this. Samac went to the Panthers.
Correct. Nick Samak to the Panthers. They've been decimated by injuries, so they wanted to poach Samak. And then Mustafa came in. He was, one of the older players that I know you don't necessarily like on the practice squad. You like more developmental players, but I think he's a known quantity that the Ravens are comfortable with. So I'm pretty pleased with that addition.
He's played both guard and center for the Ravens in the past, but I think he's a guy who does make sense in terms of you have a person that you kind of trust as a backup. I think he's probably going to be more effective as a center, where I think they already have their guy. But it may be they're already in. I'm not at practice anymore. Maybe they're looking at Bullock at guard this week. It wouldn't surprise me if they're trying to figure out if he could be a replacement there, or Cleveland for that matter, um, just to figure out their next man up options. So the other thing I would ask, Dellinger and Dalcourt are still available as of right now. They're both sitting on the practice squads of Cleveland and Washington, respectively, but they won't be there forever. Both of those players, Dellinger is probably he'd be somewhere in the top 10 or 15 guards in the whole league that are sitting on practice squads that are among that pool of talent that will be replacing attrited guards across the league.
Yep.
Might even be higher than that. Might even be number 3 or 4 on somebody's list. Dalcourt is out there, a guy the Ravens are very familiar with. He's probably not in the top 15, but he still is the kind of guy that gets lost before the season is ended. Should the Ravens make a proactive move there, or do you think they've still are buying into the notion that Emory Jones is going to be back and play this year?
I don't see how you can assimilate Emory Jones into the lineup midstream after he hasn't practiced mid rookie minicamp onward. But I would be in favor of adding a 10th offensive lineman, and I think you subtract the 4th running back. I think that's how you make the math work. That would make a lot of sense to me. The offensive line has struggled. You want depth there. You need depth there for this season and the future.
Yep.
Maybe there's another play they like one another practice squad better than Dellinger, perhaps. I'm not sure. It seems that guard play is sort of down across the league. So we'll see how it shakes out. But I do think that the offensive line is something to monitor. They have played some tough fronts the first 2 games. I'll give them credit for that. But the schedule's not getting any easier in the short term.
Yeah, absolutely true. And we also a couple other notes on the practice squad. Malik Cam re-signed to the practice squad. They released him with the injury to Van Noy, he could be a guy who would be even elevated and
Yep.
activated. And that, boy, would that be a slap in the face to Ajabo if they elevated Malik Ham for this game in order to get their fourth outside linebacker.
Oh, for sure, for sure. If they elevate a player that they released from the practice squad, brought him back, and then put him over the former second round pick who they hasn't earned a jersey yet. No, I think they're going to give Ojabo an audition and see what he can bring. Um, but he's going to be on a short lease, no question about it. The way they made room for Malik Cam was to put the special teams ace JT Gray, who was added to the practice squad from the Saints, on the practice squad injured list. I'm not exactly sure the length of time he has to stay on there or what exactly the nature of the injury was, but apparently that was a corresponding move.
He wouldn't be able to practice at the very least while this is going on. Yeah, but yeah, that, we're talking activations for this week. It becomes a much more complex puzzle. It would be made simpler in a way if Humphrey was not going to play, but if Humphrey does play, then you've got a whole bunch of choices you have to make. The same would be true for, if they knew Likely wasn't going to play, that they would have an easier chance. It does not appear Ricard will. We don't believe Van Noy will. They've got still a fair number of roster decisions in flux, and still some very talented players who are on the sideline. That would easily make another team's 53.
Yes, absolutely. You don't want to be in a position where you're trotting Humphrey and Alexander out there, where injury risk to either or ineffectiveness risk to Alexander, and then you don't have TJ Tampa or Keon Martin or someone there able to step up. So it's going to be a roster crunch for sure this week. They do have the extra day to figure it all out due to the Monday night game. That's why we haven't seen an injury report yet as we record. But we'll see. I think if Likely can go, they do not elevate a fullback / tight end, Mitchell Payton or Scott. I think they would just probably roll with 3 tight ends and use maybe Kolar as a fullback when necessary.
Yeah, they could do that. We haven't seen too much of Kolar as a in the backfield player. We've seen him mostly at the line of scrimmage, and I think it probably is the best use for him. But they may have to change some things. So far, it's been ZMP has been the guy in the backfield. So we'll
Right.
see if they try and activate either him or Scott. I think they've in a way been holding back because these 2 games are coming up, which are enormous. The Lions are enormous litmus test for how good this team really is. But the Chiefs come afterwards, and they're an enormous and the second big game the Ravens will have played against a conference opponent in terms of trying to get their seeding set properly.
Absolutely. I think if they could make one adjustment to the way they construct the active 48, it would be to some players who are activated who have formerly played special teams but are limited to fewer snaps. Allow them to play more snaps. Just because Justice Hill's been in the league for 5 years now or whatever doesn't mean that he's graduated from special teams. I think he can still play special teams. Tylan Wallace and some of the players, it seems maybe Buchanan, Simpson can play a full share. I don't see really what is the big difference if a player can play kickoff return coverage. Why could he not play punt return coverage or punt coverage? Excuse me. I think it's a pretty similar skill set for the most part.
Okay. All right. I'm not going to say no on that, but there are certain players who are really not going to help you on special teams. And one of the reasons Malik Ham might be the guy for the 4th outside linebacker position is Ajabo's a big 0 on special teams.
Yep.
So I could see a world where Ham is activated over Ajabo, and I think in that case you give up less at that position, having Ham, taking some actual outside linebacker snaps where he can play some Sam. He can help you against the run. He rushed the passer pretty effectively in the preseason. I really wouldn't have a problem with that at all if that's the way they went. Whereas with Ali making the move for special teams over Keaton Mitchell at running back, I think they gave away way too much offense without that. And I do want to get back to 2 questions related to that we kind of skipped by when we talked about Keaton Mitchell earlier.
Sure. Sure.
Okay. So the first is from Spencer Peterson. We'll take it as a comment more than a question. Ken, today's game seems to be a good example, and this is talking about the Cleveland game, of how Mitchell would benefit this offense. With the Browns bottling up Henry, he allows you to flip such a different look in the running game. Really don't get it having Ali over him. I think he's right, both in terms of that and misdirection. Liam McCusker says something similar in the Keaton Mitchell inactive. Is Keaton Mitchell inactive? I think is what he means. In any way tied to Ricard also being inactive. It's such a head scratcher. What do you think about that? Is there any possibility it's tied to Ricard?
I don't see how it would be. It seems that Mitchell Payton's a direct replacement for Ricard for what he's been asked to do. I just think it's, Harbaugh's affinity for special teams and wanting to reward players that try hard more than some of the players that have better ability. We've seen that, at times rear its head, and I completely disagree with that ideology. I think Mitchell could have helped you in both of these first two games, and I think he should be a featured part of the offense and a real asset to the team for the rest of the season. There's a chance that the Ravens beat the Chiefs 2 seasons ago in the postseason if he did not get injured, and I don't want to leave that ability, that game-breaking ability, on the bench any longer.
No, I'm in the same position, and I think they do have some malleability in terms of giving Ali's special team snaps, if you want to call them those, to Justice Hill, and giving some of Justice Hill's offensive snaps to Keaton Mitchell. So it's the opportunity is there to get Keaton Mitchell on the field, but I'm at a loss to understand why the Ravens haven't done it so far. Maybe it'll become apparent this week. Maybe there's some great coaching thing that went into this, some great mental choice that they made to keep Keaton under wraps or ready or healthy or whatever for these couple of games that'll seem really important to us.
Yep. Yep. Maybe. Hopefully.
Let's move on to one final thing, which came out this week, and it was of great interest, was Shedeur Sanders. Now, a lot of things have been said by Shedeur Sanders and his camp about other teams wanting to draft him and Shedeur vetoing the draft pick. Yep. I heard that said about I think it was the Packers, was another team who did it. When you get down in the draft far enough, value is value, and you think, boy, maybe we can turn this player into this. Shedeur Sanders is one of the players in the National Football League currently that just comes with so much baggage. There is a real question as to whether you could have some people haven't blocked out for the entire draft because of that.
Yeah, fifth-round pick. It's very rare to hear a fifth-round pick, which is not John Elway or Peyton Manning and Ryan Leaf or whatever the story was with all that years and years ago, where you're talking about the top overall 2 picks. It's unbelievable to me. And Deion Sanders is one of my favorite players of all time. He's the reason why I root for Florida State. And he played for the Ravens at 37 to 38 years old, and he apparently had a good relationship with Ozzie, and he was a contributor even at that age, which is unbelievable. You would think that if I'm a player coming into the league as a 5th rounder, at some point your ego has to get checked, and you say, wow, the league doesn't value me higher than this. Who would I rather play behind? Joe Flacco and Deshaun Watson salary cap hit, or Lamar Jackson? I would certainly rather come to the Ravens, a good, well-run franchise. So it's really puzzling that he would even have that option, that the Ravens would even consider calling him and saying, hey, would you like to play for us? That's pretty surprising to me.
I think that is surprising too. And first of all, I'm surprised they made the call. Second of all, I'm surprised they gave a crap what he thought about it. Yeah. You want to draft him? And if the only goal was to keep him for 4 years as your 3rd quarterback, maybe carry him on the 53 because you probably have to, and just basically keep the guy from going to the Cleveland Browns, or, that's the talk about why they drafted Mike Green, was the Chiefs were going to draft him in 3 or 4 selections.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they didn't want that to happen. They said, this is, this is what the end result of this is going to be. So let's make sure we get him. And that looks like it's been a very good move. We haven't heard anything bad about Mike Green in the time he's been here. I mean, and on the field, he looks exactly as advertised in terms of his exceptional, mobility and Gumby-esque bendiness.
Yeah, sure. That's interesting, to sort of bring it together with the first or the second topic with the athletic team spending, that the Ravens are taking other teams' philosophies and strategies into consideration, maybe more than they have in the past. I think that is an interesting development, considering how dedicated they have been to their long-term philosophy for so many years. That now they're pivoting a little bit because obviously, John Steve Bisciotti made a what was it, a no exceptions, I forget the terminology, but
Right.
he didn't want anybody that had domestic violence and that sort of thing, or sexual assault on the team after Ray Rice. And they pivoted a little bit with Green, and they pivoted a little bit with Void Years. And it's interesting, that they're trying to keep up with the Joneses, maybe in a little way with those
Okay.
two moves.
So that's a Green. That's discussing the Green move, and I was relating Green to Sanders in terms of they didn't want somebody else drafting somebody because you don't want a division rival to get him.
Yeah, playing
So,
defense.
yeah. So I don't think that I don't have a problem with that at all in terms of getting Shadur Sanders. Probably. I almost would want to draft him and have him have an apartment where he has a virtual practice machine, and he's just not around the facility. But that's obviously I don't mean that. But I would want to be very carefully controlling Deion Sanders' access to management and the facility for starters. And I'd want to very carefully be discussing with Shadur, what they're expecting out of him in terms of growth as a quarterback and what they want to see.
Mhm.
And just behavior as a human being too, because a guy like Sanders is perfectly capable of acting like an ass and getting himself traded.
Well, they certainly like something about him. They value their
Mhm.
fifth round picks. They wouldn't have thrown away a fifth round pick if they didn't think that he could potentially be a capable backup down the road. So it's a quite the tidbit there that we get. I think that was Adam Schefter, or was that Ian Rappaport? One of the two big guns, I think, was
Yeah,
part of that.
I'm not sure, but
And he kept it in his back pocket this whole time because it happened during the draft, and he waited until they were playing each other to release the report.
well, good for him. That makes a lot of sense. And then we saw. I'm sorry, Carson Vincent was the pick, and
Hmm.
we saw the video of that where basically Warhop is banging the table for him
Hmm.
and really really wanting to get him. And that you know I'd say the initial results of Vincent's play are way above expectation in terms of what he did in the preseason. I still don't think he's going to play in 25, but I think he could be. He could be on the field in 26. So if you're looking at what's like some positive news from the offensive line play this year, I think that's one of the things I would point to.
Definitely, no question about it. Any chance Vincent could be part of the solution at guard if that really becomes an issue this season, or still too raw and doesn't have the right body shape?
It doesn't have the right body type would be my big thing. I mean, he's tall, lean, great feet, length. He's built to play left tackle or nothing. And I think he'll be a left tackle. I think he'll be fine left tackle. If we saw Joe Noteboom play really poorly this year, I would not even be beyond the pale now. And I was very late getting to this point that Vincent could actually see the field in 2025. Otherwise, I think the only way you'd see it is if one of the big two is injured, Noteboom
Hmm.
is in at the other position, Vincent is elevated because they don't have another choice, and then there's a series at the end of the game in a blowout where he gets to go in.
Yeah.
That's the only way I would see him playing at 25 otherwise.
Well, a very exciting development with Vincent's, development so
Mhm.
far, and really be great if you can have a cheap day three player at a premium position that can
Yeah.
give you 2 or 3 years of high end play on his rookie contract. It's been a while since they've had one of those.
Yeah. I agree completely. All right. Well, always great doing this show with you, Voss. Tell folks where they can find you. Well, talk to you online if they want to. And you also brief plug for the Fiamato while we're at it.
Absolutely. So I am on Twitter X at Vasilis Fiamata, Vasilisfiamata. Fiamata is the name of our new restaurant. Been open for almost 7 months now. Website is thefiamata.com. We're located at 2900 Baltimore Boulevard in Finksburg, Maryland. Phone number is 410-833-5777. Recommend reservations on the weekends for sure.
All right. I'd give their pizza a try. I also love the rigatoni out there. So good stuff. Other folks
Thanks,
out
Ken.
there, hit me up if you'd like to do a film study short. I'm still arranging for those to occur. We will have a bye week coming up where there's be some opportunity to do some short content. And we're already, I mean, if through 6 games, we're going to know a lot about who the 2025 Ravens are at that point. And it would be nice to be talking through some of the new set of concerns and developmental hopes and whatnot at that point. But I'd love to hear from you. As always, thanks for everybody's support, and we really always love it when you tell one new person about the show. For Voss Loricos, this is Ken McCusick saying goodbye. We'll talk to you next week on Friday Morning GM.